In the name of the God whose mercy is profound and whose kindness is everlasting, we are undertaking a survey of the possibility of understandings as to who could be the person who was sacrificed amongst the children of Abraham for sacrifice, for being offered to the Almighty. This is the 9th episode of the series, and I am presenting the research of Mr. Abdus Ghauri, who is the research fellow of Al-Mawrid, which is an institute of Islamic research and learning, and is located, its head office is located in Lahore, and it is dedicated to the task of undertaking research on Islam and indeed on all other religions. After having come to this point in his book that the Bible and the scholars of Bible do not give us any clue or understanding of what place Moriah was, where could it be located in the present times, how to identify a location by the name of Moriah. The author goes on to offer an alternative understanding, and he says that the place which can be most appropriately described as the Moriah that was mentioned in book of Genesis chapter 22 is Al-Marwa, which is a small hill in Mecca. Now, of course, what he says is that this claim cannot be established unless we trace a few questions, certain things that come to one's mind while this suggestion is made have to be properly addressed. So he goes on to raise a few questions and then answers them one by one. The first question that he raises is, who could be described Abraham's only son? Of course, this matter has already been dealt with, but in order for the argument to be built up gradually, this particular point has been repeated. And in the page 73 of his book, he says that Ismail was Abraham's firstborn son, who remained his only son for nearly 14 years. The age of 13 years circumstantially suits and is compatible to all considerations for him being offered for sacrifice. The next question which the author raises is, which place did Ismail and his mother live after, according to the Bible, they were sent away? To answer this question, the author says on page 74, it is the factual position that Ishmael's progeny has been living in Mecca and other parts of Arabia since time immemorial and is still living there. The Bible claims that Hagar and Ishmael had been settled by Abraham in the wilderness of Paran and Beersheba, and both of these places have allegedly been claimed to be located in Sinai. But even according to the Bible, there are no traces of any Ishmaelites in Sinai. That they have been living around Mecca and Arabia has been discussed in detail later in this book. The third question that has been raised is there a tradition in Mecca that Abraham's only son was sacrificed? And then he answers this question by saying that it is a reality that millions of pilgrims travel to Mecca in the lunar month of Zulhajj to offer sacrifice in commemoration of Abraham's offering his only son Ishmael for sacrifice. Hundreds of millions of people offer the same sacrifice in their hometowns at the same time. So what he says is, most certainly there is an overwhelming evidence that there was a son that was sacrificed whose tradition has lived until the present times. Then he goes on to ask the question, is that tradition related to any mountain? And goes on to answer by saying that it is only the mountainous region in the land of Moriah at Mecca, to which the tradition of Abraham's offering his only son Ismail for sacrifice is related. The Arabic word for Moriah is Marwa. In Hebrew, Moriah is composed of 5 letters, whereas Marwa is composed of 4 letters. The first and the last letters Mim and He, Ha, are common in both the words. The middle letters Ra and Wa are resembling letters in Hebrew, as can be appreciated through observing them. They are often interchanged by the scribes. As far as the letter Yaw is concerned, it is a very small letter in Hebrew alphabet and is likely to be omitted or inserted due to some negligence or misunderstanding of a scribe. It is quite probable that the actual word may have been Marwa, which would have been mistakenly recorded as Moriah in the Bible by some scribe, because Moriah, Marwa was not a commonly used word in the biblical literature. There can be another possibility, which is the difference in Moriah and Marwa may be the variations of pronunciation between the Arabic language and the Hebrew language due to the change of the geographic conditions, as is common in so many cases. A construing reader might be aware of these instances of such cases. Then he goes on to raise another question, and that is there any evidence of that sacrifice of the firstborn to be evidenced? And he responds by saying that it is interesting to note that the horns of the ram which was offered in the stead of Ismail had been preserved in the Kaaba, the holy sanctuary, and they remained there until 64 AH, that is after Hijrah, or 683 AD. Wensink and Jomir have reported in the Encyclopedia of Islam in their article on the Kaaba that at the time of the conquest of Mecca in 629 AD, all the pagan trappings which had adhered to the Kaaba were now thrust aside. The 2 horns of Abraham's ram did not crumble to dust until the rebuilding of the Kaaba by Abdullah ibn Zubair, which was a few decades afterwards. Then he goes on to raise the question as to whether there were convincing evidences that Abraham and Ishmael were present in the site of Moriah. And he answers by saying that there is the Mijam in very close vicinity of the Kaaba, and Wensink has provided the following details about it. It's a depression in it, that is the Kaaba, just opposite the door, and has still to be mentioned. It is called Al-Mijam, the trough. According to legend, Ibrahim and Ismail here mixed the mortar used in the building of the Kaaba. There is the Maqam Ibrahim, about which Wensink has explained. Between the archway Al-Hatim and the facade northeast of Kaaba is a little building with a small dome, the Maqam Ibrahim. In it is kept a stone bearing the prints of 2 human feet. The patriarch Ibrahim, father of Ismail, is said to have stood on his feet when building the Kaaba, and the marks of his feet were miraculously preserved. Finally, he raises this question: are any religious festivities traditionally associated with Moriah and the sacrifice of the son? And he answers it by saying that there have been a number of festivities related to this offering, having perpetually been celebrated by the Arabs centuries before the advent of Islam. He mentioned that these festivities are related to a number of places around this Moriah. There are the 7 rounds of running between As-Safa and Al-Marwa, and then there is the offering of sacrifice of goats, sheep, ram, camels, etc. on the festivals of Eid al-Adha by hundreds of millions of Muslims throughout the world, and by millions of Muslims pilgrims at Mecca during the days of Hajj. In other words, there is an abundance of evidence that shows that there was a sacrifice made, and the sacrifice was religious in nature, and it is being commemorated for a long period of time. May God enable us to understand what the truth is, and may He enable us to follow it, to accept it, and to proclaim it.